exercise have to do with it? Okay, just as a purely scientific way of thinking, when a girl gains fat in puberty, she goes from being skinny like Twiggy to looking like Raquel Welch 10 years later. What the hell did how much she eat or exercise have to do with it? This is a rare disorder called progressive lipodystrophy. This photo was taken in 1920 or 1912. This is a woman. What happens in these cases that they begin to lose fat above the waist. It starts in their heads. They lose all subcutaneous fat. They get this sort of, the author whose textbook I took this from said this sort of witch-like look above the face because they lose all their subcutaneous fat. It literally spreads downward at the rate one British physician measured it in his patient at a rate of about 1 inch a year. And then when it gets to their waist, it stops. And then afterwards, they become obese below the waist. So above the waist, they have no body fat at all, and below the waist, they're clinically obese. And these cases often, this woman, I think, has a BMI of around 32, so you'd consider clinically obese. And the way these Germans and Austrians put it is, look, are we supposed to blame the top half on undereating and the bottom half on overeating? Okay, that's obviously absurd, and yet if this woman had 5 more pounds of fat, 10 more pounds of fat above her waist, she would just look obese. There would be no question of this being a lipodystrophy, and we would blame the whole thing on overeating. So if we can't blame these regionalized changes in fat distribution on undereating and overeating, why is it we can blame the whole thing on it? That was why this example was used in these textbooks. Here's a modern version of it, HIV-infected this is HIV-infected lipodystrophy. You can see the same loss of subcutaneous fat in the cheeks, facial lipoatrophy characterized by sunken cheeks and hollow temples. These patients often put on fat elsewhere. They lose fat in the butt. They gain it in the gut. They get this distinctive buffalo hump on the back of their neck. And what's interesting, again, is this is a photo of this is the same patient, before and after antiretroviral therapy. So if this patient, if you knew nothing about, and this is how physicists often think, if you knew absolutely nothing about this patient's history, and he comes into your office presenting this, you're going to tell him to exercise, go to the gym, eat less, give up beer. But this was this patient 4 months earlier. He was going to the gym. Okay? He started antiretroviral therapy. Something made him accumulate this fat mass in his stomach. We can be pretty confident it wasn't overeating and sedentary behavior. And the question is, why is it any different for us than it is for him? So let's look at the physics. Why do we believe this? And the reason we believe this overeating thing is because of the laws of thermodynamics. Basically, the first law of energy conservation, which says the change of energy in a system is equal to the energy. This is a simplistic, 8th grade way to look at it. Change in energy in a system equals energy in minus energy out. We're going to make this our fat masses, so the change in fat mass is equal to energy consumed minus energy expended. This is the fundamental reason. Whenever I argue, or somebody else before me has argued, that calories have nothing to do with obesity, that somebody's always going to accuse us. I've been accused by the leading obesity researcher in the field of not understanding the laws of thermodynamics. I was actually accused, it was interesting, Larry King and Jillian Michaels, the trainer from the Biggest Loser, gave me a lecture on national television about the laws of thermodynamics. It's a high point of my life today. I wanted to say that I studied physics at Harvard. I was not a very good student, I admit, but anyway, let's talk about the laws of thermodynamics. This is what they say. So what we believe is, obviously, if En goes up, if we increase the energy we consume and we decrease the energy we expend, delta E has to go up. We have to get fatter, right? That's why we believe it. If we can decrease the energy we eat and keep the energy we expend constant, the energy stored in our fat mass has to go down. That's why we believe it's all about calories, energy in, energy out. But the interesting thing is, this equation doesn't have a cause in it. There's no causal information. What this equation says is, if a system gets bigger, if it gets more massive, it will take in more energy than it expends because we cannot create energy from whole cloth. We cannot make up energy. That's what it means about the law of energy conservation. And it says, if a system gets smaller, if it gets less massive, it has to let out energy because that energy has to go somewhere. It says nothing about cause. And it's the example I use is that you can ask this question, like this room is full of energy. People are energy, okay? So you could say, why is this room crowded? It's the equivalent of saying, why is this person's fat tissue full of fat? And if I say to you the answer is because more people came in than left, you're going to look at me like I'm either an idiot or a wise, smart guy, right? So you're going to say, well, that's no answer. Of course more people came in than left, right? Why? But why is it crowded? So then I say, well, look, if more people come in than leave, it has to get crowded, right? Have I actually told you anything? This is what we're doing when we tell people that they get obese because they're overeating. If they've gotten fatter, they had to take in more energy than they expended. That's what the laws of thermodynamics tell us. They tell us absolutely nothing about why that person took in more calories than they expended. And what's interesting is because they tell us nothing, but we believe they do, we turn into a psychological thing. Now it's, well, why did they get fatter? Because they don't have willpower, because they're not as good as I am at eating moderately, because they don't exercise like I do. That's always the implicit statement. This law says absolutely nothing, zero, about what causes obesity. This is a fundamental error that's been made for 50 years. If I could get you to think of one thing from this law, never, ever use the laws of thermodynamics to defend some belief about obesity. They say nothing about them, no more than any other physical law. You could use general relativity or Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. They're all true. They have to be true. We know they're true. They say absolutely nothing about what causes obesity. This is how Jean Mayer put it in 1954. Nothing I'm saying is new. It's just been ignored. Obesity, too many people believe, is explained by overeating. Actually, it should be recognized that this is simply restating the problem in a different way and reaffirming somewhat unnecessarily one's faith in the first law of thermodynamics. To explain obesity by overeating is illuminating a statement as an explanation of alcoholism by chronic overdrinking, or chronic fatigue syndrome is caused by not having enough energy. It's it's bizarre how meaningless it is, and yet it is so ubiquitous. And then in 2010, I'm going around the country trying to explain to people, get people to care that our fundamental belief in obesity is nonsense. Anyway, here's the second problem. E in and E out are not independent variables. When you think to yourself, if I could just get myself or my patient to eat less and maintain his expenditure, he has to lose weight. That's true, he does. But the question is this a possible physiological state? Can you get someone to eat less and keep their energy expenditure up? Can you increase energy expenditure and have them decrease energy intake and keep that up for life? And by the way, I just realized now as I'm talking that I am running long. I don't know, it's 7:30 in the morning. I apologize to anyone who's going to have to leave. I'm going to try to keep it short, but I'm talking too much. You can't do it. Bodies are actually built to match intake to expenditure. You can demonstrate this effortlessly in animals. But the way Jeff Flyer and Terry Meritos Flyer, Jeff's now dean of Harvard Medical School. They're both Terry's his wife. They're both obesity researchers. In Scientific American, they put it this way. An animal whose food is suddenly restricted tends to reduce its energy expenditure, both by being less active and by slowing energy use in cells, thereby limiting weight loss. So, by the way, we are animals. So what they're saying goes for animals, goes for humans too. If you decrease intake, expenditure decreases also. It also experiences increased hunger so that once the restriction ends, it'll eat more than its prior norm until the earlier weight is attained. Likewise, after intentional overfeeding. If you increase intake forcibly, the animal will start to expend more energy, expenditure goes up, and exhibit reduced appetite with both states persisting until weight falls to the previous level. This is why exercise doesn't work for weight loss. Remember the concept of building up an appetite? How many remember that? Back in the 1950s, you used to tell someone in the 1960s, why don't you go take a hike or play 18 holes of golf or play 2 sets of tennis and build up an appetite. Because when you actually expend energy, your body wants to replete the energy. Just like when you sweat, it wants to replete the body water. This is a homeostatic system. An interesting thing that a British blogger pointed out to me, he said, imagine I'm having a fancy dinner party tonight. I got the 5 best chefs in Seattle cooking. Okay, and they are going to make a feast, the likes of which you've never seen, and I'm going to invite you to dinner, and I want you to bring your appetite. I want you to come hungry. What are the 2 things you're going to do? You might do to come hungry. To make sure you not eat all day and work out. Maybe work out even more than usual. So the two things that we tell people to do to lose weight, eat less and exercise more, are the exact two things you're going to do if you want to get hungry. I mean, there's something fundamentally wrong here, and hopefully I'm going to solve that problem. Here's the solution. This is how the Germans and Austrians thought about it prior to World War II. First of all, they started with first principles. Like if I ask an obese